Let's tease out this issue of a women's budget agenda and find out whether it was really necessary and whether it has delivered what it promised. I'm joined now by Shivani Gopal, who's the founder of The Remarkable Woman. Good to talk to you again, Shivani. Been a lot of political pressure for. I've got the document here, the women's budget statement. A lot of money spent, a lot of packages in there. Your overall assessment as to whether it's delivered what the women of Australia would have wanted?
Yeah, look, we've come a long way, Chris. I mean, we've come a long way from the $240 billion insult is what I thought was what we had last year, to over 6 million working women, which worked out to be about $40 each, to over $3 billion in spending in this budget. Of course, we know that $1.7 billion of that has gone towards childcare, $1 billion has gone towards women's safety measures. So it's certainly come a long way. To answer your question, no, look, it's not perfect. There are more things to be done, but you've got to give the government credit in the sense that they have been listening. They certainly did have a women's problem. And here in Australia, we do have an issue around needing to boost women's workforce participation, around needing to boost the support around childcare. And so there are great measures that are being done around that. There are a few things they could have done better, and I'm sure you and I will flesh that out. But all in all, they've done well.
It's a bit of an embarrassment, though, isn't it, suggesting you need a special women's package? I mean, it was a really artificial criticism of last year's budget, one of the biggest spending budgets ever, all the JobKeeper stuff and everything in there, to keep men and women in jobs, to keep families going through the pandemic, and yet people say, oh, there wasn't enough for women in the budget.
Yeah, well, there certainly wasn't, because if you think about where the investments was going, the investments were all going into areas like construction, right? And so these are male-dominated industries. And, of course, ScoMo's response was, well, women want to drive on safe roads. There are much bigger problems that need to be solved. And, Chris, you're right, it is embarrassing. Why do we need to have budget measures that focus on women? It's embarrassing because we should no longer have a problem. It's 2021. We shouldn't have a gender pay gap. We shouldn't have such a big gap in women's workforce participation, and yet we do. And so to solve that issue, we do need to have specialist attention. It's that old argument, right, Chris? In order to get to equality, you've got to invest in equity. And the way you invest in equity is to dig deep on that one issue in order to have an equilibrium throughout other areas. Yeah, and so that's why we needed it.
The gender pay gap is greatly exaggerated. Depending on how you drill into the figures, you can find something there, of course. But the whole point, for instance, about childcare is
I do disagree.
That supports children and families. It's not a gender-specific service, is childcare.
Childcare services affect families, you're right, men and women. Greatly, though, it does affect women, because women are having these conversations with their partners and saying, well, childcare is costing anywhere between $100, $150 a day. Am I going to invest in childcare and go back to work, or am I going to have this conundrum where I'm actually not going back to work? And so therefore it affects more women from a workforce participation level, more so than men, because women are the ones who are more likely than not to take parental leave. Women are also the ones who are generally earning less, again, because of the gender pay gap. And there are two reasons for that, right? With industries that are female dominated will actually have the overall average pay drop. So there's a huge issue around that, Chris. And it's not just as simple as saying, oh, well, there are different roles and there's monies that are paid for those specific roles. Even if you look at key management personnel, women in key management personnel, this is data that's readily available from WGEA, which is short for the Workplace Gender Equality Agency. You can see that women managers will earn around $100,000 less. That's a lot of money versus male key managers. So it really does make a big difference. And so men and women have these pragmatic conversations when they're in, heterosexual partner relationships. And it's, hey, who's going to take the time off work? And if the woman is earning less, then she's the one who's taking time off work, which is why childcare by and large ends up being a woman's problem. So this $1.7 billion that's being invested, you find that families who are earning between $80,000 to say $200,000 and have got children in childcare will benefit in some way or another, whether it's $100 a week or $2,400 overall a year, depending on how many children they've got. But by and large, it does.
It's all a useful service, is childcare, and it's good for the economy. It's good for men, it's good for women, it's good for families. We'll have to continue this discussion another time, because the idea that investing in infrastructure somehow has a gender attachment to it because mostly men build the infrastructure does my head in. But I know we'll have a good argument about that another time, Shivani. I appreciate it.
We shall.
Shivani Gopal there, she's the founder of The Remarkable Woman.